Hi, you're listening to the Wall Street Oasis Podcast, a podcast about breaking into the world of finance, along with interviews with those who have. I'm your host, Alex Grodnick, and today we are speaking with Shahzad Khan. Shahzad is a VP at Moelis. He's got a really interesting background and is a very smooth speaker. So let's jump into it. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a Netflix for finance? Well, there is. It's called Real Vision, and it gives you unprecedented access to some of the most respected names in finance. Watch interviews with legends like Kyle Bass, Jeff Gundlach, Stanley Druckenmiller, and many, many more. If you want to be part of the Real Vision revolution, visit realvision.com/WSO.
No, thanks for having me, Alex. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, so you and I met last year, kind of in the investment banking recruiting cycle at Anderson, and I still remembered to this day that you were probably the most eloquent speaker that I met, and so I thought I had to have you on the podcast when I launched. So thanks for being here.
No, thanks for those kind words, and hopefully I don't make a fool or a fool out of myself after you saying that.
Right, and just so I can paint the picture here, your look matches the way you speak. You have a cool custom-made suit on, and like the first button's unbuttoned. I've always wanted that. My suits, they've never had working buttons.
Alex, it's Sears Roebuck. It's what this is. Okay.
So why don't you start off, you're VP at Moelis now, but start off, how'd you get here? Before school? Let's start kind of at the beginning.
Yeah, so I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, went to school in St. Louis and Washington University, and very early on, being, the nerd I am, kind of got interested in investment banking almost starting in high school. There was a family friend, a guy that I looked up to that, was very smart, very intelligent, very charismatic, that had found investment banking as a career. He was at Penn at the time, and he came back home to Memphis and was telling me about this life on Wall Street. And Alex, I come from a background where no one in my family is in business. Everyone is in healthcare. My dad's a doctor. I've got sisters who are all in various parts of the healthcare field. So as someone who had no access or view into that world, it was a really exciting kind of story to hear. And I said, wow, this could be something that, I could pursue and be interested in. And so I did that. And so when I got to WashU, I was in the undergraduate business program there, became singularly focused on getting to Wall Street. And so I did that. I pursued that in college and ended up in New York working in investment banking. And after New York, ended up going to business school, and then that's what brought me out ultimately to Los Angeles.
Right. So right before we turned on the mics, we were talking about hustling your way into banking internships when you were just started undergrad. Tell us how that happened.
That's right. So I was a freshman for trying to figure out where I was going to spend the summer. And a lot of my buddies were going back home, and I did the same thing. But I said, what am I going to do when I get home? How am I going to, again, get experience in investment banking? I had no idea what investment banking really meant. I had this one guy's view of it. But there happened to be a small regional investment bank in Memphis. And a lot of the guys that are at that firm or still at that firm went to my high school. And so I picked up the phone and I called. I looked through the directory online and found one of the MUS alum. My high school was called Memphis University School, MUS. But got his number online and dialed it. And he happened to be president of Equity Capital Markets. So kind of a senior guy. I had no business calling directly. And his secretary answers, and I introduced myself and ended up, she said, I told her my story. I said, hey, I'm looking for an internship, would love to talk to this guy. And so he's not in right now, but maybe you can call back and send me your resume. And I did that. I kind of applied. I sent the online resume, and I never heard back. So I called again, and I asked for him again. And finally, I think it was probably 3 or 4 calls later, she finally put me through. And and he said, Shahzad, I've been hearing you're calling my secretary nonstop and won't give up. What is it? What can I do to help? And I said, look, I gave him my story and said, look, I have no experience. I'm ready to work hard. I'll do whatever you ask me to over the summer. And he said, look, we usually don't do this, but just given kind of your enthusiasm, given how persistent you've been, why don't you come on? I've never hired a freshman out of college, but we'll give it a shot. And so purely through just, dialing and I guess my naivety of not giving up and not knowing what I was doing, I landed that role. And it ended up being a great summer. I got to learn what an investment bank is about. I saw equity capital markets. I spent some time in corporate finance and M&A and was invited back over the summer. So it was just one of those lucky, really, had nothing to do with who I was or what I'd been able to accomplish, more of so just pure persistence.
Right. I don't know if it's how much luck, but it's a lot of persistence. And I think that's a great key to finding everything that you want in life. Just
absolutely
identifying it and then not taking no for an answer.
I agree. I totally agree. I think that's something that's a skill or a trait to have, whether you're just starting out or you're, at 50 and leading a business. That kind of dogged determination is there's no substitute for that.
Right. So now it's 2007. You're graduating from WashU. What happens?
That's right. So I went to go work at Bear Stearns, and I was at WashU at the time. Not a lot of the large white shoe firms came to WashU to recruit. I'm sure it's very different now, but the Goldmans, the Morgan Stanleys really didn't show up on campus. But a few of these kind of smaller banks did, and Bear Stearns was one of them. Bear Stearns was one of the fourth or fifth largest investment bank at the time, and had a reputation for being a little bit scrappier and a little bit more entrepreneurial and hiring kind of outside of the core Ivy League, and ended up falling in love with the firm, the people, and accepted the offer to join them in 2007. It's funny. A funny story is I also was interviewing with JP Morgan at the time and turned down JP Morgan's request to interview to say, and I called the guy, and I remember this like yesterday, and said, hey, I'm really appreciate the opportunity, but I've got an offer and I've accepted a position at Bear Stearns. And he said, why would you ever do that? Bear Stearns is such a small, who knows what's going to happen to Bear Stearns? And I look back on that, and there's no way the guy knew what ultimately would prevail, but it was just one of those twists of fate that, I picked a horse that ultimately failed. But anyway, so I get to Bear and I get to New York. I'm super excited, and that first year was great. I mean, I was learning a lot. I knew going into investment banking what I was getting into because I had done the internships, and so kind of went in very clear-eyed and focused on getting the type of experience I wanted. Unfortunately, in March of 2008. We all know what happened at Bear. So,
wait, so did you lose your job?
I did. So I ultimately lost it in June. So I stayed on for a year, and we transitioned out. But yeah, I did. I had to figure it out again.
Right, and then so you got another job, and you had that for a few years, and then business school.
That's right. Well, yes. So I went to another shop, and that shop also went through its own turmoil. So I was out of a job again after 7 months.
Right.
So
it was just a crazy time.
It was just a crazy, crazy time. And so at that point, I kind of hit pause and did a little bit more self-reflection. I think, having had the rug pulled out from under me at a pretty early age and an early time in my career, I grew very, very quickly, I think, and after the second, job loss, I started to do a little bit more self-reflection on what do I want to do, what's the next step, and I really came to a crossroads. There was the path to go back into finance, and I had a couple opportunities to do that, and the other path was to do something different and to do something a little bit more, focused on what I wanted to do long term, and so as I kind of went through this self-reflection process, I realized that I wanted to pivot. I wanted to pivot away from finance and go get experience in other functional and disciplines. And a perfect way to do that was business school. And so that's what I decided. I took a year off. I spent the time applying to business school and working on a nonprofit project in India, which was extremely rewarding and a unique chance to do that before I kind of went back and focused on myself for however many years after that. So so ended up getting into UCLA and moving out west from New York.
Right, and that soul search sounds great. You came to school, see what else is out there, and what did you find then?
So, in this kind of self-reflection period of thinking about what I wanted to do next, my desire was, like I said, to get experience outside of finance. And I started talking to everyone. I said, what are the other avenues? There's private equity, there's venture capital. I can go work for a company. One that turned me on was management consulting, strategy consulting, because again, it was, very. It was that same problem solving. It was that same client service kind of dynamic role, but a chance to kind of move outside of finance and get experience in strategy and operations. And so I came to UCLA, and I even wrote in my business school essays that I wanted to make this switch to management consulting, and Anderson would allow me to do that. And so I came to UCLA very much focused on getting into management consulting.
Right. And consulting is probably the biggest job that people recruit for out of UCLA, out of business school in general. A lot of people want to go work for McKinsey's and Bain's and Deloitte's. And so you did that, right, for a summer?
That's right. So I went to work for Deloitte Consulting here in LA for the summer. And I had a great experience. And
they gave you a job offer. You said, great, I'll go do consulting now for a little while.
That's right. And again, it was meant to be a short-term thing. It was, again, just furthering my business education. That's how I saw it. And
so what are you looking at? This is a short-term thing. Investment banking was 10 years. Is it, I think if I am a banker, a consultant, I can be a CEO in 10 years? Was that kind of the idea?
I think the long-term, the 10-year plan was always to do something entrepreneurial.
Okay.
And I thought that probably looked like and felt like an investor operator. Mm-hmm. So in the long term, kind of get this skill set of working across industries, working within different functions, to then have this holistic view of how to run a business and be an investor and be an operator. So that was the long-term view. Right. And so consulting was a great, again, learning opportunity because of all the things people go into it for, which is it's a very unstructured environment. You're very critical thinking based, and kind of requires you to pull from multiple disciplines of business. So yes, it was that was the long-term plan.
Right. So you had the skill set of how to buy the business, and now the idea was to round out the other half, figure out how to operate it.
That's right.
Okay. So how'd that go?
Well, great. I really enjoyed. So consulting was very much, it attracts a very different type of person than banking. And, my personality is probably a little bit more of, I enjoy being out in front of clients and presenting. And at times, consulting is very much about gathering the data, being very structured, and then going away and doing a little bit of homework and coming back with an answer. And the people that I worked with and that I worked around were very, very intelligent and a lot smarter than me. And so I learned a lot in the 2 years I was at Deloitte. And I did everything from helping a company improve its sales performance, to reduce costs, to think about how to grow. I spent my last year very much focused on that last piece, which was growth strategy and M&A. And so I found myself working with clients that were looking to buy a company. And what I found again is that it lit that transactional fire that I really enjoyed about investment banking when I was an analyst, again in consulting. And so my last year was really much spent in M&A and growth.
Okay. So you're there at Deloitte for 2 years. And you're thinking, okay, I've got the experience now to operate a business. So, entrepreneurship time?
You would no. And Alex, if I'll be honest with you, I think my start that 2 years in New York was a really trying and learning experience for me. I had friends, if you fast forward, who had been at one job or two jobs and kind of steadily progressed in their career. I hadn't been afforded that opportunity. Right. I had started at one place, that went down. Started at the next place, that went down. And so I came out of business school very much less focused on, hey, thinking about what am I going to do in 5 years, more on put your head down, work hard, and learn to get some credibility to be able to make that choice down the line. So I didn't have the confidence that of what you just said coming out of Deloitte. I still was 2 years out of business school, felt like I had a lot to learn, felt like I was doing well and progressing, got promoted and did all that, but I wasn't ready yet to make that much of a leap of faith.
Sure. So we still want some more work. So how are we sitting here at another investment bank?
I would never have thought, life has its own twists and turns, and you can only connect the dots in hindsight. And I think it was Steve Jobs that said something along those lines. I probably butchered it, but listen, it was a little bit of chance and luck or fate or whatever you may want to call it. So I'm at Deloitte. I've been promoted as manager. I'm leading teams, getting a lot of experience, but there's something missing. And I'm a pretty high energy person. I like, again, the dynamic of transactions and deals. And I'm looking across at my clients, the private equity firms and these large corporations. And while I'm a bit player as a consultant, I have a role to play in a larger transaction. I'm not the quarterback on the deal. And I realized that quickly. And as a consultant, you have a role to play. You come in, you parachute in, and you're quickly out. Whereas a banker gets to stay. It really stays from strategy all the way through execution in an M&A context. And when I realized that, I started looking kind of and exploring other opportunities. I didn't necessarily think I would jump back into banking, but when I realized that consulting had some limited scope in terms of M&A transactions, I started thinking about next steps. And my best friend, who was at Moelis at the time, and it's funny, to my earlier comment, all of my friends, my good friends out of business school were bankers, and I was the only one who went into consulting. So these guys are telling me about their deals and the work they're doing, and I'm kind of getting curious again about banking and said, hey, maybe I had a bad experience, but maybe there's still something.
You definitely had a bad experience.
Yeah, but maybe there is something to go back to it. Maybe I shouldn't brush it off so quickly. And so this friend of mine approached me and said, hey, what do you think about coming over to Moelis? And I said no. I said, I don't really think that that's the right choice right now. I don't know what it is, but that just doesn't feel right. But he said, no, come on and come in and meet some of the people and kind of learn a little bit more about the firm. I know you. I know how you think. I know how you operate. So I did that. I didn't interview anywhere else. I came in. I learned more about Moelis and the dynamic here, and it really, really fell in love with it.
Great. And so they said, okay, great, Shahzad, come here, start as a second-year associate.
Yeah, I had to take a year back. So and that was something else I had to consider, was why willing to kind of take a year back, because again, I'd been away from investment banking for a few years and had to dust off those Excel modeling, cobwebs. And while my consulting experience was in and around M&A, it wasn't. All of it wasn't directly transferable. So yeah, I took a year back, which takes a little bit of, swallowing your pride. But it was all about the long game. And I think that's been the common thread throughout my undergraduate and MBA experiences, was this desire to learn and get a real tangible, valuable and marketable skill set that would empower me to make a decision. Empower me to kind of make a choice on what I wanted to do down the road.
Right. So congratulations, you have that now.
That's right.
And now, how do you think about it?
Listen, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I think I'm in a transition period. Gone from associate, I'm now vice president here, and there is a lot of wood to chop. This place is interesting because it's very different than the investment banking experience I had at Bear Stearns, for example, or any of the larger banks I worked with. When I joined in 2014, the company had just gone public. We were around 400 employees. We're now at 650, so we're growing pretty quickly. And the model of this business has really resonated with companies. And I think because of that, it's an exciting time to be here. There's a lot of runway for, if you're young, hungry, and willing to work hard, at this firm to kind of go and do something pretty interesting. And so right now it's a good place to be. I think about, I'd be lying to you if I didn't think about my next steps. Right now, in the immediate term, there isn't any real tangible place to go. But I think long term, it will be going back to and fulfilling that dream to be an actual owner and operator one day. But whether, right now, and as boring as it may sound, this is the place I am.
Right. So 2 more questions. The first one, tell us about the structure of the office, what kind of deals you work on, how that comes to be, and what you're going to be working on now.
So the way it works is interesting. So most investment banks, and us included, you're very much subject to the geography and the coverage, industry coverage of the office you're in. And being in LA, there are certain industries that we cover that are in our backyard. Biggest being media and entertainment, I would say, followed by consumer and business services. And then there's a host of others called healthcare and consumer that are also growing for us. So the structure here has been, we're generalists up and through kind of second or third year VP, you're a generalist. So it's 2 things that influence what you do. One is kind of deal flow and whatever project or deal is coming into the pipeline, and then where you kind of raise your hand and show interest and focus. And so, for me, I've really enjoyed the generalist experience. I love picking up and putting down different industries and learning about different companies. That I think has been, whether I was doing that in banking or consulting, I've really enjoyed that. And it's a skill set that I've developed where you can quickly learn the dynamics, learn the heart of the business issues, and then to be able to credibly talk to a guy that's been running a company and in that industry for 40 years, takes some skill. And so that's one you definitely exercise. So I've really enjoyed that. So I've worked on everything from media and entertainment, some of the industries I said, media and entertainment and healthcare, and recently working with some smaller companies on capital raises in the consumer space.
Great. So last question, kind of the advice portion of the podcast.
Yeah.
You're involved in recruiting analysts and associates and interviewing them. What do you look for? What kind of things are important to you? Yeah,
no, I get asked that question a lot. And, I think, what is it now, 9 years out of undergraduate, having seen it from both sides, having gone through recruiting and being involved in our recruiting process here, I think it boils down to really 2 things. All the other stuff about your corporate finance and accounting and, kind of the academic and technical aspects of the work are table stakes. Everyone has that. Everyone could probably do that. What we do here is no more than high school algebra, right? But I think the 2 ingredients are deep curiosity. I tell undergraduates and I tell MBA students, to a man, and a woman here at this firm and in investment banks in general, I think people have a deep curiosity about business. They like to ask why, and they like to figure out how. And if you really have that, I think this is a really good place because, again, we're problem solvers. Whether you're wearing a banker's hat or a consulting hat, you're a problem solver and you're providing advice. And advice requires figuring out what the right questions are to ask and how to address them. So a deep curiosity will really propel you in this job and differentiate you, I think, when you get into the role. So that's one. And I think, 2, as funny as it sounds, and you'll be shocked to hear, you got to like people. There are very many smart people that I've worked with that don't like people. And this is a people business. And it's a hard work, liking people. I mean, trying to communicate and get your point across, trying to share ideas takes work and takes patience and takes time. And I think if you like people, you're empowered by people. If you feel like you work better in a team than you do alone, that is something that will ultimately serve you well, not in just banking, but in business, but specifically in banking.
Okay. Well, I think that's really helpful. Thank you so much, and thanks for speaking with me. This was really great.
That's been great. Thanks, Alex.
And thank you for listening. If you liked it, you should subscribe. You can find it on iTunes or at wallstreetoasis.com. We have lots more podcasts coming. So we'll be back with much more. Also, leave some comments. Let us know what you think, what we should add, what should happen going forward, who we should interview. We really appreciate it.